Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Joanna Ritchie. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. What's it like to be back in the heat of Arizona?
Oh, man, I tell you what, we were in San Diego last week enjoying the lovely holiday. The weather was amazing, and I have adjusted to coastal weather, and I am not adjusting well to 110-degree weather. So it is hot.
Well, we're going coast to coast today because our guest is from Maryland, Dr. David Lin. Dr. Lin, welcome to Dean's Chat.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
That's fabulous. And we are very informal on Dean's Chat. If it's okay with you, let's go with David and Joe and Jeff.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Joe, do you mind doing an intro?
Not at all. Thank you so much, David, for taking your time today. I've been really excited about this interview with you. Just to do a brief introduction, and then we'll kind of go through some of the interesting things in your career that you've kind of developed. But we'll start with, you went to undergrad in University of Washington and got your biology or your degree in chemistry. Went to Podiatric Medical School with the California School of Podiatric Medicine, near along the same times that I was in school. So that is fun. You're a kind of alum with me. And then went on to do your residency program, 3-year surgical training program with Aria-Jefferson Health in Philadelphia. And you were the chief resident at that program. So I would love to start there. We'll talk a little bit about your residency experience. And then we can kind of transition into where you are now and some of the things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about your residency.
So it was a 3-year residency. I actually had to scramble to get in. And I believe at the time they were planning to keep that spot empty because they interviewed, I believe, 60 people or something like that. And they were ready to just not take on a resident at the time. And I came in from the West Coast. I didn't know anybody. I don't know who the big shots were. And during the interview, I had to sit in one of the attending's cases. He had, I can't even remember what he had. It was an ankle fracture or something like that. And I knew it was a scramble, so I just went up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm David Lin. I need a spot. I'll do anything to get the spot." And within 30 minutes, he's like, "You got it." So there was some discussion like how I got the spot. And, I think half of it had to do with a lot of residents were pimping me throughout the whole interview process. And I seemed to know what I was doing. And so I got the spot. But I was pretty fortunate because it turned out to be a great program. And the program actually exceeded my expectations. I didn't know much about the program. All the programs I interviewed were at the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And from the training I got from it and compared to some of the colleagues that I had in the past that stayed at the West Coast, I realized I was doing a lot more things than I thought I was ever going to do. So, and it kind of opened my world there for a little bit. So pretty fortunate. So.
And this is a wonderful opportunity to talk a little bit about the scramble, because I tell students all the time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad student. Like sometimes it's just the way it happens. And so I love what you said about taking that initiative, because again, students will say, well, what can I do? What do I do now? So I think that was a really great, talking point about being willing to be bold and go up to a attending you don't know and just give it. Yeah.
It's kind of a last ditch effort. Always helps, right? I think most attendings, and I would say even job offers, they want to see people who are determined, aggressive. They want to take initiative, and they're for it. They want someone that's driven. And I think best advice I can give people is never give up, and just you gotta stay focused and go after what you want. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for prospective students that don't understand match exactly how it works, it is always in the student's favor. So it's not uncommon that really great programs can not match. And again, it's not saying anything about the quality of the program. It's just sometimes the way the cards shake out. So as you are ranking programs as a student, you really want to factor everywhere that you think you might want to go. You want to rank it. But if you really don't want to go somewhere, you have a chance you could end up there. So, being very selective about how you make those decisions. Can you comment a little bit about, as you were kind of going through some of that, any of the thought process in terms of ranking, or did you just not like any of the places that you externed? What the
For me, I think when I started, and this is probably my mistake when I was a student, my thought process was to stay close to the area where all my family and friends were. And I think that limited my scope of where I wanted to place my applications at. And so a lot of times, you're kind of relying on not just where you extern, but also what people say about a certain program.
Mhm.
In the West Coast, a VA program is, semi highly sought after among students. In the East Coast, it's a complete opposite thing where a VA program is not as sought after. It just depends on the area, but it's not saying it's a bad program. It just means that people aren't looking for that type of program. West Coast Kaiser is huge, right? East Coast Kaiser is nothing.
Yeah.
So it's a complete different mindset. And so where you succeed in one place doesn't mean you're going to succeed in another, and vice versa. And so I would say keep your mind open, apply everywhere that you think you might be happy, and half was luck of the draw. But even if you get into a program that reputation one isn't as good, I will say a good resident will make themselves grow even in a bad program. It's not the program quality. You make the program how good it can be, So that's my best advice.
Yeah, that's really good advice. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
I was thinking that, David, you really had a broadening of your horizons experience there. And even as a student rotating, there's some regional differences in how podiatry is practiced. Could you tell that right away when you went to the East Coast?
Uh, Somewhat. So like the West Coast, I think a lot of people do double calc osteotomies for some of their flat foot procedures. East Coast, not so much. There's certain like preferences that are slightly different. I've been in the East Coast for so long, so I've been semi brainwashed already. So I don't even know what most of my West Coast colleagues are thinking for the most part. Even when you go to conferences and stuff, like just because I live in Maryland, a lot of the conferences I like to stay Chicago and East. I don't like to fly that far to the West Coast. And then I'm sure it's the same way in the West Coast. Like the Western Conference, maybe most of the people from the West Coast will go, but none of the East Coast people will go there. And so it kind of regionally, it kind of differentiates their thought process because what they're listening to, what the surgeons are doing are different. And so it's not necessarily wrong. It's just a difference in opinion and different ways of doing things. It might have to do with patients' healing time, how patients respond to certain things, the socioeconomic status of different patients. It can drive a certain procedure to be more popular versus others. So, yeah.
The big question is, did you hang on to your root biomechanics?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that was a big advantage I had going to the East Coast because the biomechanics was such a strong thing in our school. Going to the East Coast, learning some of the surgical procedures and why they do them, and because I have the background knowledge, I felt like I was definitely quite a bit ahead as far as understanding the concept of some surgeries compared to some of my colleagues in the same year. Not to toot my own horn, but like, it definitely gave me an edge, I feel. So for sure.
That's great.
Surgical biomechanics is such a foundational concept, and I feel like it's improving, but it's interesting how people kind of navigate to one camp or the other. And everything we do is biomechanics, whether it's orthotic management or surgical. You just
Right.
maybe aren't using the same terms or the same references, but it's all there. So I love
Right.
that you've taken that with you. Maybe that's the reason that Aquinas kind of uh, began to catch on. David took it across the coast for us and spread the word. So
I don't know
we'll,
about
we'll
that,
drop
but
that one.
yeah.
Say before we start talking about 15 blades, which is really exciting, can I ask one more question about your current
Sure.
situation,
Yeah.
David? I saw that you've worked with Healogics for about 10 years in the wound care space. Can you
Right.
elaborate on that a little bit?
So when I got my first job, it was in Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's in the middle of nowhere. Uh, you could drive miles and miles of farmland next to you. I grew up in the city, so that was a brand new experience for me. The reason I took that job was because it was an orthopedic group, and I wanted to expand my surgical horizon. First year of your first job is actually probably one of your most important. It can make or break you as a surgeon, because your first complication, how you respond to it, how patients respond to you, it can crush you or it could build you, right? And so I didn't mind where I was. I just said I'm just gonna go somewhere that I know I'm gonna have a lot of surgeries, and I'm gonna work through it. Uh, cut my teeth and kind of find out what I'm made of, right? And so I went there, and um, at the time, Rockingham Memorial, which is the hospital I work out of, um, just started a wound center basically, and they were looking for someone to help. And at the time, I was trying to build my practice, so I decided to join Healogics, went through their training, and then I did, I think, one wound care day a week at the time, just to build patient population, because that's, I mean, one of the best ways to build your practice is going after wound care. You're just never going to lack that in America, especially with in the rural area, the diet and everything. So um, it's been, I would say anybody who comes out and they immediately want to stop doing wound care, you're just hurting yourself to start. Once you build up that practice, if you don't like it, give it up. It's fine. And then ever since I went to Healogics, my second job and my third job, um, I stayed with it, and that has really helped. It helps spread your name as a surgeon, because every patient you heal, it's like they'll tell people, and then it just spreads. So, especially in a small community, it builds up your practice so fast. So,
Right. I bring it up because I've worked with Healogics for years in their training sessions for offloading and debridement and things. And
right.
for our listeners that aren't aware of Healogics, I mean, at one point, I think they had about 800 clinics around the country. I'm not sure what they're at now.
Oh yeah,
So they've
it's
been
probably
really,
more than that.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some mergers, and they're really responsible for spreading tremendous protocols that are followed by doctors and nurses that weren't really trained in wound care, but caught up in a hurry, right? So Healogics, my hat's off to them. They've done a fabulous job for patients around the country.
For sure, no doubt.
Joe,
So
you
that's a
want
nice little transition
to? It
to
is.
your current job, where you
Right.
are adjunct clinical faculty for the Medstar Washington Hospital Podiatric Surgical Residency Program. So you have the opportunity to work with residents a little
Correct.
bit. How do you like
Correct.
having that opportunity, that educational experience?
It's a double-edged sword. It makes your surgical time go a little longer, but you get the reward of teaching someone, and it's kind of, they become your network down the road too. So, so I would say, I'm not the most patient man in the universe, but having resident is a blessing, because you get to train the next generation, right? And the same thing goes for getting up to date as well. So like when you're in private practice, I think the biggest flaw of being in private practice, even though you're doing continuing education and stuff like that, a lot of the things is you don't have access to the journals that some of the people that are in educational centers have. You know, some people are more aggressive. They'll pay out of their own pocket to read and stuff like that. But for the most part, 90% of what's out there at the current stage. And so a lot of surgeons tend to get comfortable, and they'll just stop reading. They'll just kind of like, oh, we'll go to a conference, see what's new, and then come on back and maybe implement uh, some new thing here and there. But for the most part, when you're with residents, they have weekly journal clubs, right? And sometimes, at least back then, not now, but back then, what I would do is I would ask for the journal articles they have at that week, and I'll just read it myself. And so and if you want to look up a certain paper, you could just say, hey, can you pull this paper for me? And they'll pull it for you, because you're there attending. So they give it to you, and then you'll talk to them about it. You have the opportunity to join in with their journal club sessions, or Wednesday educational sessions. And so having residents is definitely a blessing. The offside is, you have to supervise them sometimes. So not every resident is created the same, and their training level is different. So when a new resident comes in, you kind of have to gauge them, and you have to be comfortable giving them the blade. And so if you're not comfortable, they're not going to get trained just by watching. And so that was a struggle initially, and I'm starting to get much and much more comfortable giving the residents the blade or the drill, all that stuff. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed them. I still have a lot of residents that are my friends, and I enjoy having them around. So
David,
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Jeff.
oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say the unsung heroes in our profession are the attendings at residency programs that are bringing their cases and training the next generation of podiatrists. My hat's off to you. Thanks for participating.
Thanks,
And
I appreciate that.
there really is a learning curve to being an attending, because again, when you come out, and it's nice that you had the opportunity when you came out to kind of develop your own style, and you kind of get used to how you can have surgical techs or other people help you. And then all of a sudden you have a resident that you're having to kind of go through that all over again, and now you teach them, and then they move on, and now you have a new one. So it's like a constant refresh of kind of going through things, and how do you think about this, and how do I learn how to be comfortable letting you do things. Matt Cobb had talked a little bit about that kind of interesting experience of like, when are you, as a resident, he was talking to one of his attendings, like, when are you going to jump in here? And the attending was like, it was rush. He's like, right before you get to the point where you've messed it up so much, I can't fix it. And it's like, there's this, like, you get this comfort zone for how much you're going to let them kind of discover and figure out, to the point where it's like, okay, wait, stop. We need to take a step back, look at this, and then figure out how to proceed. So I also mirror that sentiment of there's so much wonderful experience in that process, but it does take a lot more time. It takes a lot more patience. And sometimes those two things don't always go hand in hand when you have time and patience. So to Jeff's point, definitely the unsung heroes in our profession, the attendings at all of the residency programs.
I was going to just tell a quick story, and then
Yeah.
we'll move on.
Go ahead.
So, David, just to kind of illustrate what we were talking about in mentoring residents, if I were to just flash back to 15 years ago, one of my residents at North Colorado was Christine Hoffman, and now she's the residency director at Denver Health. And I had a student in today talking about the program. So time goes by fast, and the student and the residents that we're training how to suture, how to make skin incisions, how to make dissections and osteotomies, next thing you know, they're running residency programs. So it's really
That's
incredible,
awesome.
the process.
You must be so proud when you see that happen. That just, it probably hits you, right?
Makes it all worthwhile, that's for sure. There's no doubt.
Right. That's awesome.
So I think this might be a good time to pivot a little bit. It's actually more of a piggyback than a pivot, if you're good, Jeff, to move into the second part of what I'm really excited to talk with you more about. You'd already kind of mentioned, and I've fully endorsed this as well, when I was in a private practice, not part of an academic program, the academics just naturally fall away a bit. And you're right, you get comfortable in like, oh, I know what to do. You go to a conference and not that much has really changed in some of the conference stuff, that it's just harder to stay up to date on different things. And even if maybe there aren't any big paradigm shifts, just the benefit of having other opinions and being able to kind of bounce ideas off. And so one of the other things, besides being a consultant for various medical companies, you are also the founder of 15blades Media Incorporation, which is a clinical only peer-to-peer medical forum, meaning it's only clinical people. And the platform focuses on microlearning. So I'd love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit on this kind of idea and tell us what you want to talk about with 15blades.
So 15blades, kind of my baby. I guess I'm the brainchild, but we ever since I was in residency, I always wanted to see surgeries recorded and presented in a fashion where I don't have to be in the OR and see the case. Because I remember during residency, what happens is, at least at the time, I was required, if I didn't have any cases and a big case was going on, I would go watch the case and I'll just stand there and watch it while other people are scrubbed in. And in a full room, like, I'm not the tallest guy in the in the building, so you're just kind of like, oh, can I get a step stool? Um, but we had one of our attendings at the time during my residency. I bought a GoPro and I bought a headset. So I had him wear it on his head, just like right here. And can you record this pylon ORIF for me so that I can kind of save it up and then I can just share with the residency program, whatever, in our internal thing. And he's like, okay. So he wore it halfway through the case. It was really heavy. So he's like, can we just take this off? And I was fine, just took it off. And we tried it again. It's still pretty heavy. So we kind of just abandoned the idea. We had students try to record different things and it just, it never was perfect. And so I always had that, that was kind of the seed, I guess. And then after I've been practicing for a little bit, I was talking to one of the reps that I was working with, Nancy, and I was like, I wish, we could create something that's kind of like Instagram, kind of like social media. And I wanted to put videos or just a series of photos of what I'm doing. And so people can see what I'm doing and people can share what they're doing. And, at the same time, you're kind of keeping up to date, but it's not a super serious thing. As residents, as students, as attendings, we're always rushing to the next thing, right? So micro learning allows you to look through the app, go through the feed. Within 30 seconds, you can pick up a knowledge, a tidbit here and there, and that becomes your resource, right? And so, we created this thing. It took us 2 years to build, and we're still building. Um, we created this feed that looks kind of like Instagram, kind of like TikTok, and people are putting stuff on, not dances, but like they're putting their surgical stuff on. We have almost 1,500 posts so far on the thing. Still refining the project. There's definitely quite a bit of stuff that's still buggy that we need to fix. And then also the user experience constantly being improved. Before, when we first launched the app, it was crashing constantly. And so we always tell users to like, can you delete the app and re-download it? To a certain point, it kind of hurt us a little bit, but you got to start somewhere. And so when we build this thing, you can start seeing these conversations take place like, oh, you do it this way? Oh, no, well, I don't do it that way. I do it this way because of this particular paper. And because of these certain standards, we are starting to change the way we do total ankles. We want to have stems in. How do you do your MIS surgery? What angle do you put your cutting jig? Stuff like that, little things like that. But you start absorbing these things. I find myself becoming a better surgeon just by going through the post every day, monitoring it. And then it's been a really good experience. A lot of people will say like, oh, well, LinkedIn has some surgeons posting stuff and Instagram has a bunch of people posting stuff. Why your thing, right? What's so special about yours? Why can't they just go on their platform? And so the biggest thing that ours is differentiated from theirs is we only allow clinicians on board. So in order to be on this thing, you either have to be a student, a resident, or a physician that's practicing. So your MPI number needs to be on there. If you're a student, you need your student not your ID, but your email, and then we kind of verify you on our end. And so you create this community that's purely just surgeons on there. We don't have to worry about what industries say to different physicians because it's purely just they're locked out basically. And so you could see what people are saying, I guess, more honestly about certain products because we're getting fed by industry, right? They'll get some of the KOL leaders, and KOL for short is the key opinion leaders. They'll say like, hey, doctor, you do a lot of surgery. Can you use our stuff? We're going to hire you on as our ad consultant, or we're going to hire you on as KOL. Your opinion will shape the future, right? And we provide the products. We give you money. You talk for us. Like, we are Paragon, we are Arthrex, we are Stryker, and a lot of the products get skewed, right? Like, maybe they're not that good, but because Dr. So and so uses them, it must be good, right? Versus you're on this platform, that doesn't matter anymore, right? Because it's all clinicians. If your results are not great, like you post like an ankle fracture and your syndesmosis is not reduced, people see it. It's your peers. No rep is going to be there and be like, good job, like it's just
Looks
not going to
great. Put
happen.
another one in.
Right. Exactly. And so you see on Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of likes for certain things that I post. I would say half of them are probably from reps. They're not from surgeons. Versus over here, if you get a like, it is a surgeon liking your stuff. It's not some random folk out there that's like, oh, Dr. So-and-so, I like him, so I'm going to give him some thumbs up, So that's kind of where the premise is. It's more ideological than money making, and so we're still trying to figure out down the road how are we going to sustain ourselves, because right now we have about 50 investors that have invested money in this thing, including me, and we're just burning money right now, but at some point we'll get there. But hopefully this vision, if everyone believes in it, it'll grow bigger and bigger, and will spread across not just podiatry, but also, ortho. We already have a couple sports medicine docs on there, and spread into other specialties such as dentistry, vascular, all this, so it become an all-encompassing thing that locks out industry. So, anyways, that's my spiel.
And I think that's a really appropriate way to kind of start, because to your point, there's bias built into everything. And so
Sure.
trying to piece out on social media what the transparency is versus what's the industry sponsored. And it doesn't mean that industry is bad necessarily. I'm not wanting to say that, but trying to figure out, it's very convoluted right now to try to piece out.
Sure.
And so I can appreciate that that was one of your kind of founding goals, was to actually try to not eliminate, because you can't eliminate, but at least keep it clinician focused. And I fumbled through it as I was reading it, as I typed it, because I found that to be a very unique thing about 15 Blades, is that it's not just some open forum for a platform for anybody and everybody to come make comments. It's actually very specific to this audience. So it's neat to hear some of your inception of it.
Right. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Have you guys logged on by any chance, or played with the app a little bit? I know you have an account, but
I was on the peripheral areas of it and listening to watching your story. To be honest with you, and I don't want to get into this part yet, and let's talk the clinical part first, but I'm very interested in the entrepreneurial mindset that went into creating it. We can transition there whenever you want, but
sure. Yeah.
I started a company once, and I carried around a little book that was called Rules for Revolutionaries by Guy Kawasaki, because whenever I got like, oh my gosh, I'm getting over my head here, I'm over my skis, or, I'm trying to go down a path and I see the world a certain way, but not everybody sees it the same way, right? I mean, I'm sure you've had some of that. Can you share with us some of those thoughts and what drove you forward when times weren't easy and you're looking for investors?
Yeah. Everybody thinks entrepreneurship is like this fearless like leader, like charging a boat into the storm or something like that. Very romantic, if you will. I think emotionally wise, that's the biggest thing that I needed to manage myself. It's really up and down. You could have 1 second investor says, we're going to put in blah, blah, blah money into your thing because we love it, blah, blah, blah. And then, or this person posted some incredible post that everybody was just like commenting on and discussing about. We're like, damn, that surgeon's good, this thing's working. And you have this high, right? Like, it's high. And then the next thing, like a couple days later, let's say July 4th weekend, right? Everybody's on vacation. Nobody's posting anything. And then you have this lull, and then you're just like, oh no, is this gonna work? What if it doesn't work? Like, what if all these investors see, so you get this like kind of almost bipolar kind of roller coaster emotion thing that's going on. And what I learned was I just need to pace myself, honestly. I need to tell myself that, this thing's gonna work. We want it to grow organically, because if it's not gonna grow organically, it's not gonna work, right? And so a lot of these up and downs, when it's up, you know, you try to manage yourself, not go overboard and be like, oh yeah, this thing's gonna work. And then the second thing is also I learned how to ride. And when you have that energy come in, you want to hit up a bunch of people to say, hey, can you post this? Can you post this? Or like you have an idea that you want to connect this person to this person. Or you want to hit up one investor, because before you're too afraid to talk to this investor to ask for money. When you get that, I don't know, bravado or this wave of like, I can do this, you just go for it, because that's your wave. Catch it when it's going on. I don't know if you guys sailed before. I'm a novice, but I've sailed a couple times with my buddy. And, all about it is when the wind comes, you want your sails to be set a certain way so it'll move the boat forward in the direction you want it to go, right? So not all the sails are set the same way depending on the wind. And sometimes the wind dies down and you got nothing, right? And so you can't sail, you have to motor. And so, but when the wind comes, then you pull up your sails and you just go, right? Because you got to catch that opportunity and keep going forward. And so, me, it's the same way. I'm just always looking for that new, I don't want to say high, but the new wave of wind that's coming, that I can catch on to move us to the next level. And so yeah, so my eyes are always peeled. um, but that's kind of how I go through it. And obviously I have a very understanding wife, so that helps a lot.
I always used to say, one day you live in the penthouse and the next day you live in the outhouse.
That's funny.
The
That's hilarious.
the vibe, right? Not literally, of course.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
that's very true. So you've got this platform. What have been the technological challenges? You say it would crash and things. How do you upgrade that kind of thing? Like, do you have people on board that take care of that, or do you consult out on that? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are a startup. So to hire a software engineer, at least in the US, you're looking at, almost 200K a year to pay them, which is, it's almost like a surgeon's pay for a starting surgeon. That's a lot of money. We don't have that kind of money to spend. So we outsource this to a developer group. And we actually had to fire our first developer group because initially the project was going on schedule, and you do your weekly meetings and stuff, and they're on schedule. And then in the middle of the project, suddenly things started to slow down, and we're like, August 1st was supposed to be our deadline for this. Where's my stuff? Not there. September, not there. October, all right, sir, we're gonna have to cut you off at this point. And so I remember last year during ACFAS, I was out at I think was it LA? Yeah, it was LA. I was out there and I was actually interviewing a bunch of people to become developers. So in the middle of meeting, I barely sat in certain meetings. I went to sign in, did my stuff, listened to a couple of meetings, and then I went out to meet with the different people and then after I was done, I flew to San Francisco and I met up with two different developers as well. And so during that phase, it took us about a month, and we finally found one just in my backyard in Baltimore. And we were comfortable with that group, and it's been so far so good. They've been doing a lot of really cool things on the app, and some of the stuff that they did, I didn't even think of. They added, chat functions and different little things that you think Instagram is easy to build. It's not as easy as you think. There's just always that extra thing that you think you can make it better. And And so we've been really happy with our developer. We pay them a monthly maintenance fee to kind of maintain the app and the servers and stuff like that. And then there's built into a contract where if there is something that needs to be fixed, they will fix it depending on the priority. And so we have weekly meetings, and actually I just had one this morning with them, and we needed to upgrade certain things to the platform. And so they'll tell you what the cost is up front, and then you decide if you want to go for it or not. Stuff like that. Just it's menial, but it's rewarding when you see the product actually happen. So
Absolutely. That's a great story. And kudos to you. I mean, having that entrepreneurial spirit is a different animal compared to in risk and reward, you know?
it is. I think in the back of my mind, sometimes I feel like I bit off more than I can chew. But at the same time, you know, I always think back to myself, like if I didn't try this, um, I'm always gonna wonder what will happen if I did, right? And we only have one life, right? We pass away, it's done. And to me, to live safe is great. I mean, but you know, you kind of that's not to me, that's not really living, right? Like you got to take risks. If you fail, you fail, right? You can always pick yourself back up, but like, you know, it's you got to take some risks. It's just like maybe my first step was when I went to my scramble interview and I walked up to the guy, took a risk and said, you know, I'm just gonna go for it and just say I need this program, give me a spot, right? It turns out the guy was a big shot in the East Coast. Everybody knew who he was, and I didn't.
Was it Dr. Fleming?
Yes, it was Dr. Fleming.
That's
That's
awesome.
funny.
It's hilarious 'cause I didn't know who he was at the time. I just knew he was attending at the program, and I walked up to him. I said, you know, I want a spot, and after their discussion, I got it. So, but yeah, maybe that was the first step, right? And then later on, I was able to make this step, you know,
Yeah.
because I've had that try before and worked out. So,
And it's okay when they don't always work out, right? And I think that's
right,
I love how you said that, David, is at some point everything we do in our life is risk management, right? Surgical, non-surgical
right,
treatment, all of it is risk management. And like somehow we don't translate that to our own life, and not necessarily just in the can I do it, can I not do it, but the trade-off cost of not doing, like, can I live with the wondering always, I wonder if I had done
right,
that, right?
right,
Because somebody's going to do it. Like, why not be
right,
him? Why not be David Lynn? And here you are, and you've
right,
created this product application.
right,
I mean,
right,
again, I think that's such a wonderful thing. And this idea that you want it to grow kind of organically and sustainably, because I don't know that much about startups, but the little bit that I do know, especially in the tech world, is you can also have that problem where then you grow too rapidly. And you guys experienced a little bit of that. Like now everything's crashing, and then everybody kind of gets really grumpy about it. And so, if nothing else, too, maybe to the community is like remember that there's a lot of effort and time that goes behind all of this for someone. And we're trying to make it better for you, but it's life, and life isn't perfect. And kind of got to just go with the flow sometimes. And I
right,
loved your wave analogy. Like there are so many similes that I could see and metaphors to life on that.
right,
Certainly for students, which we won't go into right now, but like that is so much of life, right? So enjoy the highs, enjoy those wins while you have them, because at some point they're not going to be there. And then you can remember how great that was and be like, okay, we're going to get back there because it is going to do this. It's not just going to stay in one direction. So I
right.
thought those were really poignant points that you made.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I hope this can help someone at some point. I'm sure I'm not here just, you know, spewing my mouth just to make myself famous. I want my app to be student friendly, resident friendly. I want people to come on because it's free. You don't have to pay anything for it. We're trying to make it to a point where it'll just pay for itself, and I can just let it go autopilot almost. And you know, if I end up bringing in big money, great. If I don't, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But it's there to help someone, you know. So Yeah.
And I think the micro learning environment, again, as we have evolved in evolved maybe isn't the right word, but as we continue to progress in the education realm, things like reflective learning, micro learning, this is the future of where certainly clinicians are going to go. And then having an opportunity to learn from each other that way. Again, there isn't something else outside of some panel at a conference where you get those opportunities. And at this
Right.
phase of my career, that is what I want. Like, I can go listen to someone who's brilliant give a lecture about some topic. I may not get as much like day to day out of that than 15 minutes of reading a really great discussion about VTE prophylaxis, right? Like,
Right.
oh, this is interesting. This is what I've always done. Or, hey, look, I am right in where everybody else is in their thought on this. I'm not an outlier, or, whatever the
Right.
thought is. So I think that that's actually incredibly powerful. So again, just some of the things that I find really interesting in regards to the app.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Jeff, your thoughts?
I was curious, David, about your mentors, both in the podiatric field and perhaps entrepreneurially. People that have influenced you. I'd be curious to what you have to say.
I would say Fleming definitely was a big mentor for me. He guided a bunch of how I think about surgery, how I approach surgery, how I approach patients. A lot of my other attendings, more or less, Dr. Miller, especially. I don't know if he's as famous as Fleming, but in my residency program, Dr. Michael Miller, he's been instrumental. I don't talk to him as much anymore, but during the time I was there, I learned a lot from him. If he's hearing this, um, and I would say, some of the books I read, Guy Kawasaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then a lot of it is just, and then my wife, she's been instrumental in keeping me um, kind of even keeled, and so, without her being in that supportive role and willing to be in that supportive role, I could not build the app to the point where I'm here now. My partners, Dr. Seeley and Greg Taylor and Nancy Taylor, they've been very instrumental as helping this thing grow as well. And I met so many people along the way. It's hard to name them all, to be honest. But it's kind of like a wave, right? You meet someone, they influence for you for a short period of time, and then you move on to the next stage. They kind of fall off, and then somebody else you'll just meet along the way, and they'll give you some good advice, and be like, "Oh yeah, I could take that." And then you have that conversation with them, and then they fall off, and then the next one, and then the next one, and it's just so many people. But I think for me, it's that mindset that I can keep learning. you know it doesn't matter how high of a peak that you grow to, you can always keep learning. There's always stuff for you to learn and improve, and you got to make that kind of a hobby. you know like, it's not work to learn, it's fun to learn, right? Little things, and you learn at your own pace, it's okay. But I think if one person who stops learning, you're kind of going backwards already. So, because the stream is not going towards you, you gotta go the other way. But if you make learning fun, you're gonna meet some great people out there. Um, it's funny, and this is a story I guess I can share. So I remember, as 15 Blade was kind of growing, we wanted to keep this under the wraps when we started, and we just wanted just a group of people to kind of build it, kind of work out the glitches and stuff like that. And one day I got a call from one of, I don't want to say competitor, but someone who has kind of a platform that's a little bit bigger. And it's people that we admire, and we're like, oh, we want to be as big as they are. They're, even though they're not huge, they're just bigger than us. And they just called us out of the blue. He's like, Dave, can you give us a pitch? We heard about you and we want to know more about your app. And at the time, I was, number one, scared, because I didn't want them to crush us, right? And then number two, I was also excited because we're big enough to be noticed. And I remember I was talking to my buddy, and he was like, "Yep, you cross the sandbars. There's sharks out there, so they're always watching." And so it's fun because it's like you grew to a certain point. Suddenly you're big enough. You get to play with the big boys now. So that was kind of, I don't know. That hit me a different way. I'll say that. So
You're right. It comes with a different set of circumstances, good and bad. But I'd rather
right,
grow than be unnoticed, right?
right.
Oh, that's great. Joe, I had mentioned that David said it was a hobby. And then I started thinking about the conversation you and I had a couple weeks ago that this Dean's Chat podcast is kind of like a hobby for us. So it's great. We get it totally.
Passion project for sure.
There you go. So I have a last question I have is, you have a practice, you work with the residency program, you have responsibility to patients, you've got 15 blades and all that goes with that. What do you do when you're not working on 15 blades or treating patients?
Probably hang out with my kids.
There you go.
We 2 years ago we bought a house with a pool, and so during the summer months we've been out at the pool a lot. And my kids, they're 6 and 8, and one of them's actually both of them are learning how to skate to become hockey players. So we'll go out on the ice rink with them. They actually just ended their last class for the season, and so we might take a break real quick. But my little one, he just learned how to swim, like I want to say a month ago. And so we'll be in the pool having a lot of great times. And it's also good decompression for me to think about other stuff other than the blade stuff. So, but that's kind of where we are. Back then I used to bike a lot. And so me and one of the techs that works in our practice, we used to go on like 30-mile bike rides. And one time we rode our bikes at it was like 30 degrees out, and we all like masked up and everything. And after I came back, I was like, all right, never again, I'm done. So, and actually I never brought my bike out ever again since then. That was at least a year ago.
That's what trauma will do to you.
I can see a guitar behind you. Do you play?
Oh yes, I do play a little bit. I guess I have many interests. So my friend and I, he just finished helping me build my own pedal board for my electric guitar, and so we've been kind of messing around with that a little bit. So there's a lot of things that interest me, and I think it's good and bad because you got to put your time somewhere, right? So I'll just like mess around here, and if I'm bored, I'll go do the other stuff. You could probably tell by now, I can't sit still. I have to do something. So
this is going out on a limb, but if you picked up that guitar, could you play us a little tune?
I probably could, but I won't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to embarrass myself.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Wow, what a fun discussion, David. Joe, you have anything else?
No, thank you so much, David, for sharing your time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And if you guys are listening, don't forget to download the app.
If it's okay with you, we'll put a link at the bottom of the show notes so that they can find you and find more information. If that's okay with you,
yeah, that works. Just put our website. That's totally fine. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And you guys are doing such great things for podiatry. I can't commend you guys enough. Kwadu, the Temple professor, that he used to be my resident. He used to be my chief resident when I was younger. And he can't speak enough about you guys. And you guys have interviewed a bunch of some of the people that are involved in 15 blades as well. So it's really fun to see them interview, which is awesome. So
you can have like a little column of Dean's Chat interviews with 15 blades.
Yeah, David, we can make a playlist for you, 15 blades playlist anytime, no problem.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
But thank you for the kind words. And Joe and I wish you the best of luck with 15 Blades. It's such an awesome initiative and endeavor, and kudos to you and your team and your family. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything.
You're welcome.
Well, have a good night. I'm probably gonna go hang out with my kids right now. I can hear them outside already.
Sounds good. Well,
Knocking on
But
the
I
door.
appreciate.
David, thank you. We're going to
Yeah.
send you one of these Dean's Chat cups, of course. And to all
Love
of our
it.
listeners out there, if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. And until next episode, cheers, everyone.